I was standing in his apartment when I heard the key turn in the lock, and in that split second before the door opened, I realized I had just destroyed the one person who had never stopped believing in me. My name is Angelica, and I need you to understand something right now before I go any further. This isn't a story about making a mistake. This is about making a choice, over and over again, even when I knew exactly what I was risking. Even when I could feel everything starting to crack around me. 6 months ago, I had what everyone said was the perfect life. I was 28, married to David for 3 years, living in a beautiful apartment in downtown Seattle. David worked in tech, made good money, treated me well. His mother, Patricia, had welcomed me into their family like I was her own daughter. Better than her own daughter, actually. She told me that once, after a few glasses of wine at Thanksgiving. She said I was the daughter she always wished she'd had. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized consulting firm. Nothing glamorous, but I was good at it. My boss, Richard, had been there for 15 years. He was 42, divorced, one of those men who wore expensive watches and knew how to make you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. I'd noticed that about him from my first week, but I'd filed it away as something irrelevant. Just an observation. The first time something shifted, I was working late on a presentation. It was a Thursday in March, raining the way it does in Seattle, where it feels like the sky is just endlessly emptying itself. Everyone else had gone home. Richard came by my desk around 7:30. "You're still here?" he said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, something softer. "Just finishing the Morrison proposal," I said, not looking up from my screen. He pulled up a chair, sat down next to me instead of standing. "You work too hard, Angelica." I laughed it off. Says the guy who's also still here. "I have nothing to go home to," he said. "You do." There was a pause. I could feel him looking at me. I kept my eyes on the screen, but my heart had started beating faster, and I hated that I noticed that. Hated that some part of me responded to the attention. "David's probably already asleep anyway," I said, and immediately regretted it. Why had I said that? Why had I offered that little crack into my marriage? Richard didn't say anything for a moment. Then he reached over and closed my laptop gently. "Go home, Angelica. The proposal can wait until tomorrow." I should have just said okay and left, but instead I turned to look at him. And when our eyes met, something happened. Something I can't fully explain even now. It was like the air changed, like we both acknowledged something without saying a word. I went home that night and crawled into bed next to David, who was indeed already asleep. And I lay there in the dark, replaying those 3 seconds when Richard and I had looked at each other, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But I already knew it meant something. The next few weeks, I told myself I was imagining things. Richard was just being friendly, just being a good boss. But then there were more late nights working together, more conversations that went longer than they needed to, more moments when his hand would brush mine as he handed me papers, and neither of us would acknowledge it. I started noticing things about him I shouldn't have been noticing. The way his voice changed when he said my name. The way he always seemed to know when I needed coffee. The way he looked at me during meetings, like he was having an entirely different conversation than everyone else in the room. And the worst part? I started dressing differently for work. Nothing too obvious, just a little more effort, a little more thought. David noticed once, said I looked nice, kissed me on the forehead, and went back to his phone. But Richard noticed every time. I could tell by the way his eyes would find me the moment I walked into the office. If you're still watching this, I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you is where I crossed the first line, and I can't take it back. It was late April when Richard asked me to help him with a client dinner. "Just the two of us," he said. The client was demanding, particular, and Richard trusted me to handle the presentation. David was supposed to be out of town that week anyway, at a conference in San Francisco. It felt safe, professional. The dinner went well, the client signed. Richard and I celebrated with one more drink at the hotel bar where we'd met them. 1 drink became 2. 2 became 3. And somewhere around midnight, Richard said, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I look forward to seeing you every morning more than anything else in my life." My throat went dry. Richard, I know, he said. I know you're married. I know this is completely inappropriate, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this way. I should have left. I should have called a car, gone home, put distance between us. Instead, I heard myself say, I look forward to seeing you too. The look on his face when I said that, like I'd just given him permission for something dangerous. Come upstairs with me, he said quietly. And God help me, I wanted to. Every cell in my body wanted to. But I stood up instead, my legs shaking, and said, I can't. I have to go. I made it to the parking garage before I broke down crying in my car. Not because I'd almost done something terrible, but because part of me wished I had. I went home that night and David was there. His conference had been canceled at the last minute. He was sitting on the couch watching TV, and when I walked in, he smiled and said, Hey, baby, how was the dinner? And I lied. I lied so easily it scared me. Fine, boring. I'm exhausted. He kissed me goodnight and I went to take a shower, and I stood under the water wondering what kind of person I was becoming. But the next day at work, Richard was waiting at my desk when I arrived. We need to talk, he said. We went to the conference room. He closed the door. I'm sorry about last night, he said. That was unfair of me. I put you in an impossible position. It's okay, I said, even though nothing about this was okay. It's not, he said, but I meant what I said, Angelica. Every word. I looked at him, and I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could shut this down right now. I could transfer to a different department, ask for a different supervisor, create distance, or I could step off the edge of this cliff and see what happened. I meant what I said too, I heard myself whisper. The next 2 months were a slow-motion catastrophe. We didn't sleep together. Not at first, but we did everything else. Long lunches that went nowhere near the office. Text messages late at night that I deleted immediately after reading. Conversations in his office with the door closed where we talked about everything except work. Where he'd tell me I was brilliant, extraordinary, that his ex-wife never understood him the way I did. Where I'd feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. David started noticing I was distant. You okay? He'd ask. You seem stressed. Just work, I'd say. And technically, it wasn't a lie. Patricia, my mother-in-law, invited me to lunch one afternoon. We went to this little French place she loved in Capitol Hill. She held my hand across the table and said, You and David are happy, aren't you? Of course, I said automatically. She studied my face. You know, Angelica, I love you like my own daughter. If something were wrong, you could tell me. I almost broke right there, almost confessed everything. But instead I smiled and said, Everything's fine, Patricia. I promise. 3 days later, Richard kissed me for the first time. We were in his office after hours, going over quarterly reports. He stood up to close the blinds, and when he turned back to me, something in his face had changed. He walked over to where I was sitting, pulled me up gently by my hands, and kissed me. I kissed him back. When we finally pulled apart, he said, Don't say you're sorry. Please don't say you're sorry. I'm not, I said, and I meant it. In that moment, I wasn't sorry at all. That night I went home and made love to my husband, and the guilt was so crushing I could barely breathe through it. But it didn't stop me from going back to Richard's office the next day, or the day after that. If you're wondering how I justified this to myself, I can't really explain it. I told myself David and I had grown apart. I told myself this thing with Richard was different, special, meant to be. I told myself I deserved to feel this alive. None of it was true, but I needed those lies to keep going. Richard started talking about leaving his ex-wife completely behind, about how he'd never felt this way before, about how we could have a real future together. And some delusional part of me started to believe him, started to imagine a life where I left David, where Richard and I could be together openly, where somehow this could all work out. Then June happened. Richard asked me to come to his apartment one evening, said he wanted to cook dinner for me, wanted us to have time somewhere private where we weren't sneaking around. David was working late all week on a major project. It seemed safe. His apartment was in Lower Queen Anne. One of those modern buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He'd made pasta, opened wine, put on music. It felt almost normal, like we were a real couple having a regular evening. After dinner, we were standing by the windows, looking out at the lights of Seattle, and he said, "I'm falling in love with you, Angelica." My heart stopped, because I knew I was falling too. I'd been fighting it, denying it, but standing there in his apartment, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Richard," I started to say. "You don't have to say it back," he said. "I just needed you to know." He kissed me then, and this time it was different. Deeper. More real. His hands were in my hair and mine were pulling him closer. And every alarm bell in my head was screaming at me to stop, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. We moved to the couch. Things were escalating. I could feel myself giving in completely, crossing that final line I'd somehow managed not to cross until now. And then I heard it. The sound of a key in the lock. We both froze. Richard's face went white. "Who has a key to your apartment?" I whispered. "My cleaning service," he said. "But they only come on Wednesdays." The door was opening. I stood up, trying to straighten my clothes, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. And then Patricia walked in. My mother-in-law. David's mother. The woman who loved me like a daughter. She was carrying a casserole dish, clearly planning to leave it as a surprise for Richard. Because of course she would. Because Richard wasn't just my boss. He was David's cousin. Second cousin, technically, but close enough that they grew up together. Close enough that Patricia considered him family. I hadn't known that when I started at the company. Hadn't known until much later. And by the time I found out, I was already in too deep. The three of us stood there in that apartment, frozen in this horrible tableau. Patricia's face went through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, understanding. And then something worse than anger, betrayal, grief. The casserole dish slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. "Angelica?" she said, and her voice broke on my name. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything except watch her face crumble as she realized what she'd walked in on. "Patricia," Richard started. "This isn't—" "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment her heart broke. "My son. You're married to my son." "I can explain," I said, which was the stupidest thing I could have said, because what explanation could possibly matter? "How long?" she asked. I couldn't answer. "How long, Angelica?" 2 months, I whispered. She made a sound like I'd physically struck her. 2 months. You've been lying to him for 2 months. "Please," I said. "Please don't tell him. Not yet. Let me figure out how to—" "How to what?" she said. "How to break his heart. How to destroy him. Because that's what this will do, Angelica. It will destroy him." She turned to Richard. "And you. I thought better of you. I really did." Then she looked back at me and her expression was something I'll never forget. Not anger anymore. Just sadness. Pure, crushing sadness. "I came here tonight to bring you dinner because you'd mentioned you were working so hard," she said to Richard. "I was trying to be kind, to take care of my family." Her voice broke again. "I never imagined I'd find my daughter-in-law here, in your apartment, with your hands all over her." "Patricia, please," I said, crying now. "I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," she said quietly. "You made it happen. Both of you." She walked to the door, glass crunching under her shoes, and paused with her hand on the handle. "I won't tell David," she said. "But not for you, Angelica. For him. Because telling him tonight, like this, would be cruel. But you're going to tell him, soon, and if you don't, I will." Then she left. Richard and I stood there in the wreckage, literal and metaphorical, and I felt my entire world collapsing. Because Patricia knowing changed everything. She wasn't going to stay quiet forever. And more than that, seeing her face, Seeing what our betrayal had done to her had made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. "What do we do?" Richard said. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know." I went home that night and David was still at the office. I sat in our living room in the dark, trying to figure out what to do, trying to imagine how I could possibly tell him, trying to imagine what would happen when I did. When he came home around 11, he found me there. "Hey," he said. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I turned on a lamp, looked at him. This man I'd married. This man who trusted me completely. This man whose mother now knew I was the worst thing that had ever happened to their family. "Long day," I said. He sat down next to me, kissed my forehead. "Want to talk about it?" And I almost did. Almost told him everything right then. But I looked at his face, his kind, tired face, and I couldn't make the words come out. "No," I said. "Just tired." "Okay," he said. "Let's go to bed." We went to bed. He fell asleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, knowing I'd just missed my chance to come clean on my own terms, knowing Patricia's deadline was ticking, knowing I was about to lose everything. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't face Richard, couldn't face the office, couldn't face anything. David left for work and I sat on our couch for 3 hours, trying to figure out what to do. My phone rang. It was Patricia. "Hello," I answered, my voice barely working. "Angelica," she said, "we need to talk, in person, today." "Okay," I said. We met at a coffee shop in Ballard, neutral territory. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. I slid into the seat across from her. "I haven't slept," she said. "I keep seeing your face. His face. I keep seeing my son's face in my mind, imagining what this will do to him." "I'm so sorry," I said. "Are you?" she asked. "Are you really? Because sorry doesn't mean much when you've been making a choice over and over to betray someone who loves you." I started crying, not manipulative tears, real ones, because she was right. "I love David," I said. "Then why?" she asked. "Help me understand why you would risk him, risk us, risk everything." I didn't have a good answer. "I don't know. Richard made me feel special?" She interrupted. "Seen? Understood? Every affair has the same story, Angelica. And it always ends the same way. Someone gets destroyed." She leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end things with Richard immediately, today, and you're going to tell David everything, this week." "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then I will," she said simply. "But it'll be worse coming from me. He deserves to hear it from you. He deserves the chance to decide what he wants to do with his own life, his own marriage." "He'll leave me," I said. "Maybe," she said. "Probably. But that's the consequence of what you've done. You don't get to avoid it just because it's painful." I nodded, still crying. "I meant what I said before," Patricia added, her voice softer now. "I loved you like a daughter. That wasn't a lie. But you broke something that can't be fixed. Even if David forgives you, I don't think I can." That hurt worse than anything else she could have said. I left that coffee shop knowing I had maybe 3 days before Patricia's patience ran out. 3 days to find the courage to destroy my husband's world. I met Richard the next day to end things. We met at a park, somewhere public where I couldn't fall apart or be weak. "I can't do this anymore," I told him. "Because of Patricia?" he asked. "Because of David," I said. "Because it's wrong. Because I'm going to lose everything and I deserve to. But I need to at least try to do the right thing now." "What if the right thing is us?" he asked. "What if we're supposed to be together?" "We're not," I said. "We never were. This was just selfish on both our parts." He looked hurt, but he didn't fight me. Maybe he knew it was over the moment Patricia walked in. Maybe he was relieved. "I'll request a transfer," he said. "HR, I'll say there's a conflict of interest. You won't have to work with me anymore." "Thank you," I said. We said goodbye there in that park, and I felt nothing. Not heartbreak, not relief, just numb. That night, I made dinner for David, his favorite, chicken piccata. I set the table, lit candles, tried to make the moment as gentle as I could for what I was about to do. He came home, saw the setup, smiled. "What's the occasion?" "We need to talk," I said. His smile faded. "That's never good." We sat down. I pushed food around my plate. He waited. "I did something terrible," I finally said. "Something unforgivable." His face changed. "Angelica, you're scaring me." "I had an affair," I said. Just ripped the Band-Aid off. "With Richard, my boss. David's second cousin, though I didn't know that at first, but I found out and I kept going anyway. It lasted 2 months. Your mother found out. She walked in on us at his apartment 3 days ago. Nothing actually happened that night. She stopped it before it got that far. But we'd been..." I couldn't finish the sentence. David just stared at me. His face went through the same progression Patricia's had. Confusion, understanding, pain. "You're joking," he finally said. "I'm not. Richard, my cousin Richard, I'm so sorry." He stood up, walked to the other side of the room, turned back to me. 2 months? I nodded. My mother knew before I did? She walked in on us. She told me I had to tell you or she would. He laughed then, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was something broken. "So you're only telling me because you got caught?" "No," I said. "I mean, yes, but I was going to tell you. I was trying to figure out how. How to tell me you've been screwing my cousin for 2 months." "We didn't..." I stopped. Because what did it matter? We'd done everything but. The technicality didn't change anything. "Get out," he said. "David, get out of my house. Now." I stood up. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," he said. "Go to Richard's. That's where you want to be anyway." I ended things with him. "Yesterday. It's over." He looked at me with such contempt. "You think that matters? You think ending it makes any of this okay?" I grabbed my purse, my phone, threw some clothes in a bag. He watched me the whole time, not helping, not speaking. When I got to the door, I turned back. "I really am sorry," I said. "So am I," he said. "I'm sorry I ever met you." I stayed at a hotel that night, one of those extended stay places near the airport. I lay in a generic bed in a generic room and felt the full weight of what I'd done. I'd destroyed my marriage, lost my mother-in-law, probably ruined Richard's relationship with his family too. And for what? For 2 months of feeling special? For attention? For an escape from a marriage that wasn't even bad? Just comfortable? The next few weeks were a nightmare. David filed for divorce immediately. Didn't want to try counseling. Didn't want to hear explanations. Just wanted me gone from his life as completely as possible. Patricia stopped answering my calls. I sent her a letter apologizing, trying to explain, and she sent it back unopened. Richard transferred to the Portland office. We haven't spoken since that day in the park. I moved into a small studio apartment in Fremont. Started going to therapy. Tried to figure out how I'd become this person. The therapist says I was looking for validation, that I had some underlying issues with self-worth that made Richard's attention feel more important than it was. Maybe she's right. Probably she's right. But understanding why I did it doesn't fix anything. Doesn't give me David back. Doesn't give me Patricia back. Doesn't undo the damage. David's friends all know now. My friends all know. People at work whisper when I walk by, even though Richard's gone and no one's supposed to know the details, but people always find out. I saw David once, about a month ago. We had to meet to sign some papers. He looked different, thinner, harder. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "How are you?" I asked, which was a stupid question. "Does it matter?" he asked back. "I miss you," I said. He finally looked at me then. "I don't miss you at all. That's the part I wasn't expecting. I thought I'd miss you. But I just feel relieved that I found out who you really are before we had kids. Before we wasted more years together. That should have hurt. But mostly I just felt like he was right. The divorce will be final in 2 weeks. David's keeping the apartment. I'm keeping my car and my guilt, which feels like a fair trade because the guilt weighs more than any mortgage ever could. Patricia sent me an email last week. Just one line. I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for. I don't know how to answer that. Because what was I looking for? Excitement? Escape? Some proof that I was still desirable? Still special? And did I find it? No. I found the opposite. I found out that I'm capable of hurting people who love me. That I'm capable of lying so easily it scares me. That I'm capable of destroying something good because it wasn't enough to make me feel extraordinary. So that's my story. That's my confession. I'm standing here 6 months later, $31,000 in debt from legal fees, living in a 400-square-foot studio, going to therapy twice a week. And I still can't fully explain why I did what I did. But I can tell you this. When Patricia walked through that door and our eyes met, when I saw her face crumble with betrayal, that's when I finally understood what I'd actually done. Not an affair, not a mistake. A choice to value my own fleeting happiness over the people who loved me most. And I have to live with that now, every single day. Knowing that somewhere in Seattle, David is rebuilding his life without me. Knowing that Patricia probably tells people she never really knew me at all. Knowing that Richard is in Portland pretending none of it ever happened. The question I keep asking myself is, if I could go back to that first night in Richard's office, when he closed my laptop and told me to go home, would I make a different choice? I want to say yes. I desperately want to say yes. But the honest answer? I don't know. And that might be the scariest part of all. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want you to tell me in the comments. Do you think people can really change? Do you think someone who's capable of what I did, who made those choices for 2 months straight, who lied so easily to everyone who trusted her, do you think that person can become someone different? Someone better? Or is this just who I am now? The woman who destroyed her family. The woman who betrayed her mother-in-law. The woman David will tell stories about to his next girlfriend, when he talks about his ex-wife who cheated with his cousin. I need to know what you think, because I'm still trying to figure out if there's a path forward from here, or if this is just my life now. Living with what I've done. Living with who I turned out to be. Leave me a comment. Subscribe if you want to follow what happens next. Because honestly, I don't even know what happens next. I'm just taking it one day at a time, trying to be better than I was, trying to learn from this catastrophic mistake. But I'll never forget the look on Patricia's face when she walked through that door. Never forget the sound of that casserole dish shattering on the floor. Never forget the moment everything I'd built came crashing down around me, and somewhere deep down I wonder if I deserve to forget. If maybe carrying this weight forever is exactly what I earned. What do you think?